Let us pray. Almighty God, by whom alone kings reign and princes decree justice, and from whom alone cometh all counsel, wisdom, and understanding, we thy unworthy servants, here gathered together in thy name, do most humbly beseech thee to send down thy heavenly wisdom from above, to direct and guide us in all our consultations, and grant that we, having thy fear always before our eyes, and laying aside all private interests, prejudices, and partial affections, the result of all our counsels may be to the glory of thy blessed name, the maintenance of true religion and justice, the safety, honor, and happiness of the Queen, the public weal, peace and tranquility of St. Lucia, and the uniting and knitting together of the hearts of all persons and estates within the same, in true Christian love and charity one towards another, through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. The grace of our Lord Jesus Christ, and the love of God, and the fellowship of the Holy Ghost be with us all evermore. Amen. Announcements. Honorable members, I have received correspondence from the Speaker of the House of Assembly advising that the following motions and bill were passed in the House of Assembly and forwarded to the Senate for its concurrence. Public Finance Management Act, resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure to finance the implementation of national development projects, initiatives, and COVID-19 mitigation measures. The Public Management Act, resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure, operating expenses in the health sector related to COVID-19 virus pandemic. The Public Finance Management Act, a resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure, implementation of the unleashing of the blue economy of the Caribbean project. The Public Finance Management Act, resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure, organization of the Eastern Caribbean states, data for decision-making project. The Public Finance Management Act, a resolution of Parliament to write off debt owed to the government by Fonse Jacques Credit Cooperative Society Limited for the Mocha Housing Development Project, International Bank's Amendment Bill. I also beg to announce that His Excellency, the Governor General, has been pleased to assent the following bills: the Automatic Exchange of Financial Account Information Amendment, the COVID-19 Prevention and Control Amendment Number 2, the Criminal Records Rehabilitation of Offenders Amendment, Drugs Prevention of Misuse Amendment, the Income Tax Amendment, the Intergovernmental Agreement St. Lucia and the United States of America Amendment, the Land and House Tax Amendment, the Consumer Protection Amendment, St. Lucia National Economic Fund Amendment, the Money Laundering Prevention Amendment, Distribution and Price of Goods Amendment, Financial Services Regulatory Authority Amendment, International Business Companies Amendment, Insurance Amendment, the Public Finance Management Amendment, the Agriculture and Fisheries Incentives Amendment, Community Tourism Development, Customs Control and Management Amendment, Domestic Violence, Eastern Caribbean Central Bank Agreement Amendment, Supplementary Appropriation Bill 2021-22,
And lastly, the Appropriation Bill 2022-2023. Appointed to be part of this committee. And from the independent ranks, Senator Dio Lee. I wish also to inform members that in an effort to promote e-Parliament, the Parliament Office has distributed tablets to each and every member of the Parliament. I also wish to report that the Deputy Speaker of the House, Honorable Jeremiah Norbert, and myself attended a workshop for parliamentarians from small jurisdictions on multilateral climate negotiations on the 5th to the 7th of July 2022. The workshop was hosted by the CPA Small Branches Network and United Nations Development Program. It was organized for parliamentarians from small jurisdictions to discuss the role of representative and inclusive institutions in addressing the mounting insecurity caused by climate change by engaging in multilateral climate efforts. The workshop explored the multilateral landscape where international climate negotiations take place. It addressed the issues most pressing for small jurisdictions in this sphere, as well as opportunities for advancing priorities. On a more sober note, honorable senators, I would like to take the opportunity to extend sincere condolences to the Edgar, Weeks, and Murray families, all of whom have lost their dear loved ones. Yesterday was the funeral of Ephraim Edgar, and on Tuesday was also the funeral of Mr. Keith Weeks. I think also it was the funeral of Daphne Murray, who incidentally contested the elections for the Labour Party in 1982, and in fact she made history by being the first female candidate for the Labour Party of that year. She was the first, she was also a secretary to the executive at that time. I wish on behalf of the Parliament to extend God's strength, His guidance, and His blessings even in their demise. By way of housekeeping, before we begin today, before we go into our formal agenda, I would like to take the opportunity to welcome the students from the University of Birmingham. I would like to tell you how pleased we are that you are visiting with us, and I hope that you would take away some useful insights in our own parliamentary democracy in this country. I want to tell you also that I am no stranger to Birmingham. As I commenced my law studies in Birmingham, I had a very wonderful time over the years that I spent there, and I will never forget the wonderful evenings that I spent on Broad Street. Yes, wonderful evenings. So I want to welcome you to this honorable chamber. Statements from ministers. Appointment of sessional committees. Ordinarily, I would have called on the leader of government business to do so, but in the interest of time, we started a little late today, and of course, I had discussed with him that I would just undertake to inform the House of the status of those committees. Pursuant to Section 67 to 70 of the Senate Standing Orders, we are mandated to set up those 4 different committees. They are the Standing Orders Committee, the House Committee, the Committee of Privileges, and the Regulations Committee. All of those committees have been formed at a previous sitting, and so they are pursuant to Standing Order 67 to 70. We are mandated to renew them. In essence, the composition of those committees will remain the same. I will just briefly go through the senators who will comprise of those committees. As far as the Standing Orders Committee, myself as the chairperson. On the government side, we have Senators Pauline Antoine Prosper and Senators Alvina Reynolds. On the opposition side, we have Senators Angelina Ferrapolius, and the independent side, Senator Narani Aziz. On the House Committee, the President as chairman, and on the government side, Senator Lisa Cassandra Jawahir, and Senator Dr. Pauline Antoine Prosper, Senator Fede on the opposition side, and Senator Narani Aziz on the independent side. As far as the Committee of Privileges, the President as chairperson, government senators Lisa Cassandra Jawahir and Honorable Senator Gideon Ferdinand. On the opposition side, Senator Herod Stanislas and independent Senator Deal A.L. Lee. The Regulations Committee, President is chairperson, government senators are KG Amatou Sashari and Senator Alvina Reynolds, opposition Senator Dominic Fede and independent Senator Deal A. Lee. Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I beg to lay the following papers standing in my name. Statutory Instrument number 47 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control, Physical Distancing number 6 order. Statutory Instrument number 48 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control, Prohibition of Assembly number 6 order. Statutory Instrument number 50 of 2022, Standards, Fees, Amendments, Regulations. Statutory Instrument number 51 of 2022, Price Control Amendment number 6 order. Statutory Instrument number 52 of 2022, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1 number 6 order. Statutory Instrument number 53 of 2022, Fiscal Incentives, Aeroprint St. Lucia Limited order. Statutory Instrument number 54 of 2022, Legal Profession Eligibility, Sacha Sabach Chandra Simas Kiso order. Statutory Instrument number 55 of 2022, Legal Professions Eligibility, Shari and Walker order.
Statutory Instrument Number 56 of 2022, Census Order. Statutory Instrument Number 57 of 2022, Census Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 58 of 2022, Civil Code Marriage License Fees Amendment Order. Statutory Instrument Number 59 of 2022, Legal Professions Eligibility Shanice Risha Ramdan Order. Statutory Instrument Number 60 of 2022, Public Finance Management Act, Resolution of Parliament to borrow for capital or current expenditure, Renewable Energy Sector Development Project. Statutory Instrument Number 61 of 2022, Micro and Small Scale Business Enterprise, Declaration of a Small Scale Business Enterprise, Aeroprint St. Lucia Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 62 of 2022, National Savings and Development Bonds Act, Resolutions of Parliament to raise funds by the issue of saving bonds. Statutory Instrument Number 63 of 2022, Price Control Amendment Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 64 of 2022, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1 Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 65 of 2022, Legal Profession Eligibility Centel Alicia Paris Order. Statutory Instrument Number 66 of 2022, Customs Service Charge Variation of Service Charge Goods Order. Statutory Instrument Number 67 of 2022, Price Control Amendment Number 8 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 68 of 2022, Prevention and Control Physical Distancing Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 69 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Prohibition of Assembly Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 70 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Protocol Publics Omnibus Number 7 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 71 of 2022, Legal Profession Eligibility Vanessa Santana Fennel Order. Statutory Instrument Number 72 of 2022, Price Control Amendment Number 9 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 73 of 2022, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1 Number 8 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 74 of 2022, Legal Profession Eligibility Carleen Kevin Rogers Order. Statutory Instrument Number 75 of 2022, Tourism Incentives ATT Limited Order. Statutory Instrument Number 76 of 2022, Micro and Small Scale Business Enterprise, Declaration of Small Scale Business Enterprise, Optronics Order. Statutory Instrument Number 77 of 2022, Motor Vehicle Road Traffic Public Omnibus Fares Amendment Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 78 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Physical Distancing Number 8 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 79 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Testing and Quarantine Number 4 Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 80 of 2022, COVID-19 Prevention and Control Protocol Omnibus Number 6 Regulations. Statutory Instrument Number 81 of 2022 Order, Fiscal Incentives Optronics Order. Statutory Instrument Number 82 of 2022, Price Control Amendment Number 10 Order. Statutory Instrument Number 83 of 2022, Excise Tax Amendment of Schedule 1 Number 9 Order. National Utilities Regulations Commission Annual Report 2019-2020.
Maybe I should just allow you to catch your breath for a second. Motions? Leader of Government Business.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before I move to the substantive motion, I want to join you in welcoming our guests, our students from Birmingham University, and I realize quite a few of us in this chamber
do have some history with that university. So I welcome them. I hope they do benefit from the deliberations in the Senate today and wish them well with their future endeavors. Mr. President, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Be it resolved It's quite a task this morning. Whereas, as it is provided by Section 63(1)(a) of the Public Finance Management Act, number 14 of 2020, the Act that the Minister of Finance may, by affirmative resolution of Parliament, borrow from a bank or other financial institution for capital or current expenditure of government. And whereas, it is further resolved by Section 64 of the Act that money borrowed by the government must be paid into and from the part of the consolidated fund. And whereas the Minister of Finance considers it necessary to borrow of US 10 million from the Export-Import Bank of Republic of China to finance the implementation of national development projects and initiatives. And whereas the loan is repayable at 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month of the date the first advance under the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, and thereafter on the last day of each successive 6-month period. And whereas, if the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the amount of US $333,334, except that at the last principal installment must be in the amount of US $333,340. Otherwise, the amount of each installment shall be adjusted by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. And whereas, interest is payable at a rate of the 6 months secured overnight financing rate plus 0.20% plus 1.5% per annum. And whereas the loan is repayable in 20 years commencing from the date of the first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of the grace period of 5 years. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the amount of US 10 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to finance the implementation of national development projects and initiatives. Be it further resolved that A, the loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month from the date the first advance under the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, and thereafter, on the last day of each successive 6-month period. B, if the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the sum of US $333,334, except that the last principal installment must be in the amount of US $333,334. Otherwise, the amount of each installment shall be adjusted by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. C, interest is payable at a rate of the 6 months secured overnight financing rate plus 0.20% plus 1.5% per annum. And D, that the loan is repayable in 20 years commencing from the date of the first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years.
Any explanations now?
Thank you for your patience, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, I have not reached that stage yet. Mr. President, I just want to provide some context in which this resolution is being presented. As we would have heard from the resolution that I just read, this is a motion that this government is putting before this Honorable Senate to authorize borrowing from the Republic of China, the Import Bank of the Republic of China and Taiwan. And that is for the purpose of financing projects that were outlined both in the Prime Minister's budget statement and as well as they were also outlined in the, not just the speech, but the budget itself. Mr. President, it's very important that anytime we come to this Honorable House to seek permission or approval to borrow or to do anything for that matter, we have to provide a proper context and explanation. And also, we have to keep in mind the situation that we're dealing with at the time. First of all, there are some issues that have to be taken into consideration, some of which are within our local context and some of which are beyond us. I want to make reference, Mr. President, particularly to the first external issue, which all of us know by now, the war or declaration of war by Russia on Ukraine. When Mr. Putin made that decision, he didn't have us in mind. So, Mr. President, that particular situation, coupled with the already existing situation that we came into government and found, which is still with us, COVID-19, really has exerted serious external shocks on us as a country and has had serious implications for our operations. 3 years ago or 2 years ago, nobody would have thought that this situation would have been possible. And there are some circumstances under which you have to operate, but you may not have anticipated when you either are in opposition or in government. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. President, as I mentioned, that particular situation has induced serious issues that we now have to deal with. Some of them including the increase in fuel prices, food prices. We have had to make tough decisions, and we've had to provide relief, absorb costs of several commodities to allow our regular St. Lucian customer or St. Lucian citizen to be able to continue to access the resources that are available. Mr. President, at the moment, the world is virtually at its knees because everyone is being affected by what is happening. We've heard the most powerful nation in the world, the leader of that nation, making it very clear that there is absolutely nothing he can do in the context of that war, and that certain realities are facing us. So this decision is a responsible one that had to be taken with this in context, and it is being taken to facilitate a number of things. Mr. President, some of the initiatives that this particular $10 million loan is intended to address or to put forward include financing of the very publicly spoken about and discussed youth economy initiative that this government in its 2021 election campaign mentioned and promised will be one of the revolutionary initiatives that will enable young people to develop or use their talents to develop into entrepreneurship and their skills into businesses. Mr. President, 7.2 million of this will be dedicated towards the youth economy. There are several other examples, but I will refer to a few more, Mr. President. Part of this financing will be going towards development of basic, very basic, what we could call cottage industries. For example, the craft markets and the vendors in the community of Choiseul in the south, on the southeastern coast of St. Lucia, or the southwestern coast of St. Lucia. Mr. President, this initiative also is intended to provide assistance to our young CMOS farmers. This is an initiative that we want to support because right now, like bananas, we find that CMOS is being exported in its raw form, and there is not much being done to add value, to make the product more profitable and more marketable. And this, from this loan, there is also provision made for some of this money to be dedicated towards the improvement of the CMOS industry. And it's notable, Mr. President, that the craft market and the vendors who are going to benefit from this initiative are part of a constituency that is in opposition. I want to make that point within the context of what happened when I sat on this side of the House. We all know what happened, Mr. President. Now this government of inclusion has decided that the first time it comes to this House to borrow and to finance any of its initiatives, it has ensured that an opposition or opposition constituencies are not left out of the conversation. And so Choiseul, Saltibus, which is in opposition, is going to benefit from our very first initiative, as per borrowing. That is in no way consistent with a certain doctrine that we used to mention very often here. We don't have this happening on this side of the House. Mr. President, also, by way of example, we have a sum of about $200,000 that is going to be dedicated to the National Competitive Agenda and the draft innovation policy to upgrade the level of competitiveness in our business community. Mr. President, by way of another example, the existing situation on the Millennium Highway, I trod that road every day, and we have had to deal with several issues left over by our predecessors that we now have to deal with as per the upgrade of that road. And $4 million of that money will be going towards the rehabilitation and that project that is really a serious concern to our road users. Also, Mr. President, a sum of about $3.4 million from that particular loan is going to be dedicated to augmenting the street lighting project, where the initiative is to replace the existing lights with more energy efficient and climate friendly LED lights. And because, these days with the price of fuel and what's going on, any initiative that will lower your energy cost is actually something that we need to look into. So I'm very pleased that the government has found it necessary to prioritize and to go in that direction. And we know that in the advent of climate change, how much that is going to help to lower our carbon emissions and to complement the climate change and sustainable energy arguments that have been presented, especially for small developing states who generally pay the price of climate change, but may not necessarily be the most guilty parties that contribute to the problem of climate change. Mr. President, I mentioned those examples to demonstrate that we as a government believe that in these difficult times, we are very careful when we come to this Honorable House and Senate to ask the Parliament to approve any initiative, whether it is to borrow money, to pass legislation, or to amend legislation. we believe that all of these steps must be consistent with our philosophy that people must come first and that people must benefit from everything that we do. If you follow the examples that I just gave, Mr. President, every single one has some direct benefit to the people who need them most. Now, I want to say also, Mr. President, that every single one of these that I give by example can be accounted for either in the estimates that were laid before this House earlier this year or in the budget speech that the Prime Minister delivered at the opening of Parliament. And so, Mr. President, I am confident that this motion is very much in line with the principles and the philosophy that this government has set out. And it is not coming from any other angle or any other arbitrary decision. It is in line with the philosophy of this government of putting people first. It is in line with the priorities of this government and in line with what we have outlined in the first budget presented by the Honorable Prime Minister. And we look forward to the implementation of these programs for the benefit of every citizen of this country. I thank you, Mr. President.
I think you are premature. Thank you. Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the amount of $10 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to finance the implementation of national development projects and initiatives. Be it further resolved that A, the loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 6th month from the date the first advance under the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. Be it further resolved, I'll start over. Be it further resolved, A, the loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month from the date the first advance under the loan is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, and thereafter on the last day of each successive 6-month period. B, if the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the amount of $333,334, except that the last principal installment must be in the amount of $333,314. Otherwise, the amount of each installment shall be adjusted by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. C, interest is payable at the rate of the 6-month secured overnight financing rate plus 0.20% plus 1.5% per annum. D, the loan is repayable in 20 years commencing from the date of first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years. Senator Fede.
Thank you, Mr. President. Like you, I want to take this opportunity to welcome the political science students from Birmingham University. I myself, Mr. President, had some very good evenings in Birmingham, but unlike you, I didn't make it to the Broad Street. Mr. President, it was not so long ago that the popular narrative from the opposition was that borrowing was a bad thing and that the former administration was plunging the country into a state of spiraling debt. Mr. President, the opposition sought to explain that the reason why we had to borrow at a significant amount to ensure that certain revenue shortfalls were propped up by monies that were made available by the international development agencies. So we said that the revenue, for example, went down by 150 million. In some quarters, it could be quite significant. We had lost a significant amount of economic gain. So, for example, the GDP contracted by 24%. Now, it is quite amusing to me that even despite those explanations that the COVID-19 pandemic was bringing about significant economic contraction and dislocation, that some 15,000 people had lost their jobs, and the government needed to prop up the lost economic activity, that the opposition at the time didn't seem to understand why this was necessary. So it was quite refreshing to hear my good friend mention that the COVID-19 pandemic, in his own words, and I want to quote Mr. President because I don't want to misquote him. He said the COVID-19 and the Ukraine war has exerted serious shocks on the government. And so what I find quite intriguing is that while in opposition, the SLP says one thing, COVID is never a reason why you should borrow, and COVID never exerts economic shock. But while they're in government, Mr. President, it has brought about, and it is used as an excuse as to why this administration needs to come to this House and in one go, $134.5 million that they are going to borrow, Mr. Speaker, to place on the backs of the taxpayers of this country. But because they are the ones doing it, it is okay. And so, Mr. President, this kind of duplicity, this kind of double standards is dangerous for the fiscal management of our country, because it tells me that the administration is not committed to any particular philosophy as it relates to repairing the fiscal ill health which has afflicted this country for several decades. There's no question about it that this situation has existed. The issues that ministers of finances they have had to face with slow growth and rising debt and mounting debt challenges, and the phenomenon of market debt, which brought about higher interest rates with the arrival of the OECS Regional Securities Exchange back in 2003, is no secret, right? But, Mr. President, what I will not accept is the duplicity. Interestingly, I heard the leader of government business in presenting this motion suggested that this is the first time that the opposition is borrowing. I would like to submit that that's a gross untruth of the facts. And the member is abusing the privileges that he has in the House of Immunity and should do right by the people of St. Lucia and not to continue to propel untruths because you have come to this House before and you have borrowed. Now, you may want to say that those monies were budgeted for in the previous administration, but ministers of finance are empowered by our Constitution to make changes as they go along, as you have with various changes that we have made. When you came in, you have reprioritized certain funds, you have slashed certain budgets. So please, let's keep the petty excuses away from a very serious debate. I don't think that such a submission has no place in what is taking place here today. Mr. President, the fact that this administration can now come to the Parliament, fresh into its term, and in one go is able to borrow some $134.5 million. I mean, it's a whopping amount. They have said in their budget, and if you look at the estimates, which has already been made a document of the House, they have projected that they'll borrow one of the highest amounts in the history of any financial year, a whopping $505 million. What it does is that it debunks the popular SLP narrative that the UWP has left them with no fiscal space. And so I sometimes wonder, Mr. President, if the government is real, if the government thinks before it makes certain public pronouncements. Because here we go, 135 million, and it's part of a 505 million you will borrow in this year. Mr. President, sorry. You're much better looking than the Speaker. Mr. President, you will find, Mr. President, that he's mentioned that the youth economy, out of this budgeted amount, a few millions are going to go to help to propel the youth economy. Mr. President, the youth unemployment rate is untenably high. I support anything. I think the Social Economic Review says that it's somewhere about 38% in this last survey of the youth sector and unemployment and how it's been affecting. So there has been an untenable situation as it relates to the youth sector. And the opposition here, we support any undertaking that will bring about relief to the young people of St. Lucia. But what we don't support, Mr. President, is the fact that budgeted in the estimates is $10 million for the youth economy project. But out of that 10 million, over 5 million, or more than 50%, is going towards paying administrative cost. And we do not support that, and we believe that this is a betrayal of the young people of this country. The government could have employed more effective mechanisms to that the lion's share of that money was going to the young people of that country. The big issues are access to capital for young people is absolutely needed, Mr. President, in a lot of areas. Training in a lot of areas to make young people competitive for jobs, Mr. President. More scholarships so that the young people of this country can become part of the local, regional, and global workforce. And so when we talk about the youth economy, I am looking forward to a sweeping, a more comprehensive vision than this government has laid before the nation so far. And so, yes, if I'm confused about what the youth economy project really is, it is only because this administration has actually failed to give enough details about what it's trying to do. I don't think the administration understands the youth economy project itself. Mr. President, a question for the leader of government business, and in his rebuttal he can address this. He mentioned that some of the monies would go to the CMOS project. One of the motions we're looking at is the blue economy, and there's about 18 million US dollars that's allocated for St. Lucia's blue economy project. That's a substantial sum of money. It would be somewhere about, what's my math, 56 million? Senator? Almost $50 million. So that's a significant sum, and I wondered why that we would have this significant amount in the blue economy loan, which is coming up later, and to also then put the CMOS in the youth economy. But it's for the member to explain and to give clarity on that matter. Mr. President, the Millennium Highway project has now become the island's greatest roller coaster. And, you know, I think that after almost a year of being in government, a project that was well underway, that was well funded, because part of the funding came from the United Kingdom's DFID project. And so I thought, Mr. President, that this administration would have been well advanced and would have run with the ball and would have actually shored up the implementation so that the people of St. Lucia would have enjoyed a better road network within that facility. I want the member to explain what is taking so long and why haven't we seen more work done on the Millennium Highway project. We see, Mr. President, that the Rodney Bay Road is stopped up in the north of the island. and maybe it would be a good time for him to give the nation an update as to what's happening with the Rodney Bay project and how long the people of the North will have to suffer the ordeal of the horrendous traffic situation, especially at rush hour. And so it would be good to get those updates from the member on behalf of the residents of the North and, of course, the residents from other parts of the island that will be traversing the North for commercial, recreational, and other purposes. So I look forward to an explanation from the member on that. The LED lighting project, I would like more details. The member did try to explain, but the explanation is quite sketchy. He said 3.4 million is going to the LED lighting project, but how many lights are we talking about? What's the overall project? How many lights in St. Lucia are you looking to cover? And what is the timeline? By what time are we going to replace the inefficient, fuel guzzling bulbs that we have all over the country? And in what timeline are we going to see significant advancement in the LED lighting project so that we can, as you have stated, to reduce the carbon emissions that would be coming away from the current situation? 27 million is the first package, and there's a total of 134 million. This government, Mr. President, they have made a lot of promises to the people of St. Lucia. Who will forget the famous 1005 saga, where they said that when we were giving income support during COVID, that the $500 was too little for the workers of this country, who continue to face the wrath of a very difficult economic situation in St. Lucia. I think that if you were going to come and borrow as much as you are now, give the people the 1.5 that you promised them so that they can look after themselves and so that they can use this as income support. The SLP administration said in 100 days, every tax refund that is below $5,000, that the people of St. Lucia, taxpayers, will get those tax refunds. Well, it's been how many days they've been in power? It's more than 100 days. I think it's almost 365 days. And so really, I would like to see the promised tax returns to people who have overpaid in their taxes to get their monies back, especially at a time of high gas prices, especially at a time of high unemployment, and especially at a time of rising costs of living in St. Lucia, where people are crying in the supermarkets. They need those monies now. Now would also be a good time to deliver on the promise to the fishermen, the excise tax that you promised, to remove it, because in your own words, there are no roads on the sea. Remember that. And so the gas tax doesn't apply to fishermen. So really and truly, I would like an update from the member. When will we see the excise tax removed from the purchase of fuel for the fishermen of this country? I'm sure that Senator Shalry will have a lot to say on that. And then, Mr. President, the whole question of the threshold being risen by this administration. They promised the income taxpayers that if you are making $4,000, that you will not have to pay any taxes, right? Well, it's been 365 days almost, and you haven't delivered. You are turning out to be a government of broken promises, broken hope, and you have failed the people of this country. I thank you very much. I'm sorry, Mr. President, I don't have any confidence in this project that they have proposed, because so far they have mismanaged everything that they have presided over. Thank you.
Senator Shari.
Thank you, Mr. President. Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, visitors. Mr. President, I want to start my presentation this morning on the motion before us by indicating that at some other juncture in my life, I had the privilege of sitting on a committee at a local credit union, and as a member of the board of directors, I had responsibility with the rest of my team to review loans. And part of that time also included that time during the COVID period. And so you could well imagine that when I sit and when I listen to certain pronouncements and certain arguments, that I now perhaps appreciate even greater that experience that I had. Because so often it placed me in a very a situation that caused you to really ask a lot of questions when you got certain loan applications before you. And it meant that there are times when the decisions you took as a body to determine whether or not you granted a loan, whether or not you advised the member to reduce the amount, increase the amount, it really boiled down to the situation at hand, the member's own personal financing situation and so on. And so, having also been given this opportunity today to speak to that motion, really again, like I said, indicates that perhaps that was an experience that had its own perks. I listened to the member opposite speak of what he deemed to have been the then opposition, indicating that borrowing was bad and borrowing should not have been done and so on. I mean, I know I'm a bit younger than him, and perhaps, I don't know, maybe I was still being formed at the time that it was being said. And I remember quite correctly that there were issues that were brought up in terms of the borrowing that the then government was doing. But I don't think I ever remember recalling that there was an issue with borrowing, but rather an issue with the manner in which the borrowing was being done. And that the borrowing was termed unsustainable, it was termed reckless. These were the terms that were being used, but I can never remember being that the then opposition indicated that the borrowing was bad. And I started with the analogy, Mr. President, to indicate that there were times when a member would come to you for a particular loan, say hypothetically of $10. But when you look at that member's debt stock, for example, you would notice that they have a higher purchase account at Courts. You notice that they had taken something with Advanced Caribbean or with Accel Finance and so on. And when you look at the member's situation, you realize, you know what? It may be more prudent at the time to ask the member to perhaps increase it to $15, because $15 would mean that they can pay off these other loan obligations. And so it means that you give them more money in their pocket in terms of a reduced loan payment, and you have to do a lot of maneuvering sometimes in order that you ensure that at the end of the day you leave that member better off than when the member started. And so a prudent government, in the government that we have now, after almost 365 days, after having passed the budget, after having had to maneuver, and I heard something in the lower house 2 days ago. I think it was perhaps the leader of the opposition who made the statement in terms of, that we're borrowing at this point and whatever else about the borrowing. But what I do know, and he also said that it was very difficult for bonds, because I think he said something to the effect that they had to pay some of the bonds because a lot of persons did not allow theirs to roll over. And so you have to ask the question, why is it that this is one of the most secure forms of financing, government bonds and treasury bonds and so on? Why is it that so many people were so eager to ask for the government to pay up their bonds? It means that there was significant lack of confidence in the previous administration. But in almost 365 days, the government led by Honorable Philip J.P. has been able to do just that, roll over the bonds to be able to sustain the economy within that period of time. And so that speaks volumes of the government of the day, Mr. President, and I want to place that on the record. The member also spoke to, he said that, of course, they will support any undertaking that will bring relief to the youth. And so often they speak of the double-edged sword and that they're saying this and this end. And how could you stand there and say that you will support anything that will bring some sort of relief to the youth, but in the same breath say that you cannot support a motion to borrow money that will inevitably assist the same youth that you're saying that you are willing to support? How are you going to support them if you are not even willing to take a good look at what is presented before you? Mr. President, I want to speak briefly and just in terms of what was spoken before me, in terms of the Millennium Highway. Within the previous 6 years, so within the last 7 years, Mr. President, I remember clearly witnessing the sword-turning ceremony for that highway. So how could the members stand there and say to St. Lucians that it seems that this government is delaying on beginning the road and so many things like that, when that sword-turning ceremony was done under that administration? So what happened to it? And the money was there. Through his own admission, he's saying that the funds were available. So what is it that prevented the road from starting? What is it that prevented him from being in a position where we would have gotten some relief off of the roller coaster? Has the roller coaster been a replacement for not having Coney Island in St. Lucia, Mr. President? So they left it so we could feel the roller coaster when I come to Castries? Mr. Speaker, the hypocrisy, it's really glaring. And then there is the issue of the LED lights. And the member is asking, the lights have existed, street lamps have existed for as long as I know myself. I mean, of course, we know prior to 1997, there were some communities that did not have electricity and did not have street lights. But in the majority, street lights have existed in this country for so long. And climate change and fuel emission and so on has been a reality for many, many decades now. So my question is, what was the member doing? And what was the member saying? And how was the member then in the context of street lights aiming to reduce that emission whilst he was a member of the government, Mr. President? And he stands here today and speaks to it like it's a new phenomenon. He should have led the charge to ensure that these things were done. And to come here today to speak of it in that way, Mr. President, it's really amazing. And as a young person, it really blows my mind. It really blows my mind. But Mr. President, let me just revert to perhaps the more substantial part of my presentation, Mr. President. The sum of money in the motion speaks to a portion of it will be used for CMOS to improve the CMOS and craft subsector. I don't like the term subsector, not when it's spoken to with fisheries or any other. But Mr. President, it is my opinion that especially the CMOS sector is a very viable sector. And if you walk and drive through the length and breadth of St. Lucia, you will see evidence of the production of CMOS all around the island. And so for a government, especially in this time, when there is a lot of pressure in terms of food security, there is a lot of pressure in terms of income, a lot of pressure in terms of jobs and so on, has seen it necessary, Mr. President, to inject funds into that sector, Mr. President, to help boost the economy even more. It is something that obviously I will applaud, Mr. President. And what makes it even more in line with my support, Mr. President, is because in my opinion, a lot of the persons who will benefit from that injection would be the youth and would be persons of the rural community, because it is my opinion that this is where the greater concentration of CMOS production happens. But Mr. President, I want to also say that it would be my hope that we would really transform that CMOS production into, in fact, not repeating the mistakes of the banana industry. Because for all the life of banana, we produced and we sold banana in its raw form, green gold. And I do not think that there was ever a great thrust to add value to the banana. In a few, in recent times, we've seen the banana flowers and we've seen a greater thrust towards processing and adding value. And so I would really love to see that the CMOS industry is transformed in that way. So as a country, we can get the most benefit from CMOS, Mr. President. And so I look at things like added value, such as cosmetics, pharmaceuticals. We know we have a few young persons who are involved in face creams and scrubs and so on. I know a few persons in Safety Fort North, for example. We have black CMOS, we have the Opicon CMOS farmers who are producing CMOS in other forms. So we have CMOS powder and we have CMOS gel and so on. And I would really love to see some of these monies used to support that aspect of it, where there is added value and where our export and trade potential can increase in that subsector, Mr. President. Because I do believe that if perhaps we had gone that route with our banana industry, our plantain production and so on, that it would have really added more to our GDP. To boost that subsector and bring it to where what it can actually be. We know that there have been some issues in terms of theft for the CMOS, and so it is my hope that the Predial Lassani unit will really come on board to really help provide some greater level of security, some greater level of safeguarding in terms of for the CMOS farmers, Mr. President. Mr. President, I go quickly to and I do not wish to be long because I think the motion is quite straightforward. I want to look at the street lighting, and of course I applaud the initiative because it is one, as somebody from a rural community, not that the issues are concentrated to rural community, but I think that there is a safety issue that the lights will help alleviate, and that is obvious. And also, like we've indicated before, the reduction of cost in terms of the reliance on fossil fuel. But I want to just stick up in quickly and indicate that I think as a country, we should, and that conversation has happened. We remember the stories of the wind farm and so on. The greater thrust towards that other alternative source of energy. And so perhaps a combination of LED and solar-powered street lamps is something that we need to start thinking of and think of it for the longer term. And so I want to submit as well, Mr. President, that as much as perhaps my member opposite, and I know that it will be echoed by the other members. It was echoed in the lower house, and we know that there is normally a scripted repetition of what happens there. It mirrors in this house, and so we expect that it will come. But I want to submit, Mr. President, that within almost less than 365 days, the government of St. Lucia has been able to, even prior to the submission of a budget, been able to maneuver well enough to be able to pay facilities fee for our students, and that is commendable. And sometimes, before I go into some, perhaps mention the others, I need to add that, in my opinion, as a head of a household, as a mother, as a working youth, one of the things that has always been obvious is that when you look at your expenses, when you look at your income and your expenses, when you look at a budget and so on, you always have to ask yourself where to place the monies and where will it be more effective, Mr. President. And so this is a government who have come in and recognized that as much as the financial space has been very, very difficult, the question of where do you place the eggs that you have in order to bring a level of relief to your people, and sometimes immediate relief, Mr. President. And I think it is something that my colleague really seems not to understand, because he was part of a movement of fluff, of grandeur, of glitter, of sequins. And so I do not think that he understands that sometimes when you place things in a particular way, that creates a bit of an ease of a squeeze. You just release the pressure. At least if that's all you can do at the time, you release the pressure and give people the ability to maneuver, Mr. President. So sometimes for me, it means that I don't get to eat an Italian ice cream at the end of the month, Mr. President, because the child needs an extra pencil. And it's a sacrifice that I'm willing to make, Mr. President, for the greater good. And so this is what this government has been doing. So yes, things have been bad. And yes, there has not been a lot of resources to go around. But this government understands that if I can then go out into the communities and help the elderly gentleman, the sick gentleman or the sick lady who lives alone to repair the roof of their house, Mr. President. And so that is one of the burdens, that physiological need is met, and that burden is off of their back, Mr. President, that it will create a bit of a breathing space, Mr. President. And so perhaps a day or two, that individual can now put a piece of cheese in their bread and enjoy it like the rest of them, Mr. President. But they don't seem to understand that. In a time when things were really bad, the government of the day understood that as much as they could not perhaps give the 1.5 that my colleague opposite keeps speaking about, and I remember very, very early when we came in here, that he indicated that his current remuneration as a senator can no longer support his lifestyle. And so I suspect, Mr. President, that he's not been asking for that 1.5 for the rest of St. Lucia, you know. I suspect he has been crying for himself. So there is a bit of empathy and sympathy that I must show towards my member. But when the public servants, a promise made to the public servants in terms of an increase in their salaries was met by this administration, it was done, Mr. President. It speaks to a government who are looking out for their people, and a government who understands that even though we cannot move Jimmy from one place to the next, but we can do these little things that will ease the squeeze, Mr. President. And I can go on about the other things. My son, who is in Form 2, came home with a laptop a couple days ago. And Mr. President, the reality is, with 2 children in the household, I had bought devices, I bought tablets, I bought laptops. Unfortunately, it was at a juncture when my son had just said, "Mommy, my laptop not going on." And then the government announced, I should have sent it so that you all could have cleaned it up. I should have done that a few years ago. You are correct, Mr. Colleague Senator. So these are the little things that the government had done to ease the squeeze. And it allowed for a little bit of wiggle room, a little bit of leeway. And so, Mr. President, it is based on these submissions, and they did it without having to create a madi poete. I mean, if I have to count the amount of Tuesdays in that almost 365 days, we had a couple Tuesdays. And so if the current government had followed the path of the previous government, I mean, if we pull out a calendar, we would be able to determine how many Tuesdays has been in that period of time. And so it speaks for itself, Mr. President. And so I want to say that I applaud the Minister of Finance and the Prime Minister, Honorable Philippe J. Pierre, in the manner in which he has been able to manage the economy, in the manner in which he has been able to ease and soothe the pains and the qualms of people, especially the people who need it most, Mr. President. Persons at the lower prongs of the income ladder, persons who have no income because they've lost it during COVID-19. These people are grateful, Mr. President, for what their government has been able to do for them within the last 11 months. And maybe some people do not understand it, but the people who have actually felt the effects of the policies of this government, you walk through the length of breadth of St. Lucia, and they are grateful for what has been done. And this is what matters, Mr. President. The fact that the people know, they understand, because they feel the difference that has been done in their pockets, in their households, in the way in which they've been able to live, Mr. President. And so, like I said, I will not be long. I make these submissions, Mr. President, in support of the motion before us, Mr. President. I thank you.
Senator Polius.
Yes, please. Yes, please. Thank you, Mr. President. And I want to also welcome our visitors here. Mr. President, this is another opportunity to advance my sentiments and to echo the same of the minority. Those mostly affected by legislation and policies crafted by this administration and its duplicity and psychological maneuverings. But before I delve into the motion at hand, Mr. President, I seek your indulgence to express my profound sadness regarding the recent vicious and cold-hearted attack on our multiple-time Calypso monarch, Minel. No one, absolutely no one, irrespective of political persuasion or the modality used for self-expression, whether it be dance, art, or music, should be subject to that kind of atrocity. I call upon all women in this country, our sisters, the women of all organized groups, and I must single out the women of the United Workers' Party, female parliamentarians, and all other leaders to stand with Minel and the family during this time. And I hope, Mr. President, that as outlined in the recently ratified Domestic Violence Act, that the perpetrator or perpetrators of this heinous act will be brought to justice. Mr. President, I now segue to the motion to authorize the Minister of Finance to borrow a total of US $10 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to finance the implementation of national projects and implementation. Mr. President, this administration, when in opposition, chastised the UWP government during its tenure for coming to this house on several occasions.
The truth.
You see, the truth hurts.
The truth.
It does. And this is exactly what was done.
That's right.
It's the truth.
That's right.
They chastised this administration
It's the truth. That's what you're doing.
for borrowing money for a multiplicity of reasons, but principally for capital and current expenditure. And this is exactly what you are doing, friends and family, and I'm going to show you this later on.
Friends and clicks.
This is exactly what you are doing. They found all sorts of ridiculous terms and constructs, Mr. President, to refer to the mandate that any government, including this one, has, particularly during tumultuous or harsh economic times, to procure the fiscal resources needed to run the economy. We recognize, Mr. President, that monies must be borrowed. And so we come to this upper chamber today seeking concurrence for the Prime Minister and Minister of Finance to borrow, when we look at everything in total, over 134 million EC dollars. Mr. President, on this side of the House, we feel vindicated. We feel vindicated, Mr. President. Because what we realize is that the borrowings done by the former UWP administration was justified. That was justified. Mr. President, we recognize that small island developing states like ours, states that are not self-sufficient and which have been seriously impacted by global phenomena like COVID-19, political unrests, and now the ongoing war between Ukraine and Russia. We must borrow. And this is beyond a doubt. We must borrow. Because we know, Mr. President, and we understand that this government is very much aware of the implications that such global happenings have on our country. These things can actually disrupt and adversely impact the governance and management of the affairs of this country. They knew it then and they know it now.
That's right.
But what did they do instead, Mr. President? They misled the people of this country.
Created fear.
Claiming that the former administration was recklessly borrowing monies. They knew very well, Mr. President, that the loans were necessary to undertake and implement capital projects and to finance current expenditure and address emerging shortfalls. They knew it then.
Yeah.
But you know what? Just to gain cheap political points, they played on the psyche and the minds of the people of this country.
Preach it, my sister, preach it.
And now they're lost, they don't know what to do.
So, Mr. President, one does not need a high level of intellectual or psychological acuity to realize that this government has done nothing but deceived and fooled the majority of the people of this country.
That's right.
Except for some of their party hacks.
That's right.
The red zone.
The clicks.
Right into that.
Après ça, tout le monde ka play with. Wasko ka coupe glomoun. Lucia ka disconnect. People are bawling. Bagay vini tellement wed. C'est pas ça yo te di nou. You need to respond to the plight of the people, not just those. And you claim that you are putting people first. Which people are you putting first?
That's right. Themselves.
Who exactly are you putting first? I have a warning. I have a warning for you later on. Later on. I hope that part of the
They
monies
did put on the table as well.
that will be borrowed will be used to provide some form of relief to the people of St. Lucia. Not just those who supported you in the last general election, but all the people, those who need it most. And there is no need to dichotomize who needs help. The red zone versus the yellow zone. This should not be done. This is what is happening now. This is what is happening now in many constituencies, Mr. President. And I'm hoping that such will discontinue as we move ahead. I thank you, Mr. President.
Masterful presentation. Masterful.
Senator Ishaba here.
Thank you, Mr. President. Everything is a joke for y'all. That's why y'all not there on this side. Mr. President, allow me to, thank you for acknowledging my request to contribute to this motion. Allow me to recognize the students from the Birmingham University, to welcome them to St. Lucia. I am pretty sure they will learn a lot from these debates today. And of course, a special congratulations to the students who for the first time sat the CPEA. I know it was a very trying time for our students, almost 2 years at home, and not being able to interact and experience a full classroom setting. But the CPEA assessment, 40% is an assessment of their time during the school year and 60% the exam. So I really want to take this opportunity, without singling out any students, but to congratulate all those who were successful and wishing everyone else who were not successful all the best next time. Mr. President, if you would further indulge me, yes, we are in the carnival season, and I want to take this opportunity to really say kudos to the team who have been putting on events, very successful events. The Calypsonians who placed, and the young Desrel, 22-year-old Desrel, youngest Calypsonian in St. Lucia's history to have won the crown. I think that is remarkable. After independence, thank you. That is remarkable for our people. And we did hear of some statements on how his achievements have been rewarded. And really want to extend kudos again to the government for seeing the need to reinstate. Well, they did make mention that early next year we will see the reinstatement of Junior Calypso. Thankfully, we are in a period where we are recovering from COVID, so we need to do just that. Mr. President, and of course, as we're speaking about Carnival and Calypso, I really have to, of course, it would be remiss of me if I did not extend speedy recovery to Calypsonian Minel. I will not go into the details of what happened. We know it has been a trying time. Her personal issue, her physical ailments, being out in the media, but we really want to extend a speedy recovery to her, and we did hear of the government's efforts to provide support to her, so we're really thankful that this is being done. And lastly, in my introduction, Mr. President, something very unique has happened with our young people again. In 2013, St. Lucia brought home 2 medals from CCCAN, the Caribbean swimming competitions. In 2014, 1 medal. 2015, 10. 2016, 3 medals. 2017, 2. 2018, 2 medals. 2019, 2. And this year, our St. Lucian team has brought home 11 medals. For a very long time, our young people are finally reaching out on the world stage and making us proud. And we want to let them know that we are truly proud. Mr. President, as I go, I know my members on this side who have gone before have spoken a lot about the motion before us. But I just wanted to highlight a few things which came up and I thought it really needed to be addressed. With the 10 million US that is being borrowed, what I am very happy about this, Mr. President, is that for the first time in a long time, a breakdown was given. A breakdown was given, and in the event that the members opposite were not paying attention to the House or didn't see the briefing notes or have continue to play to St. Lucians like they have no idea because that is just usual business for them, a breakdown was presented. Now, when the St. Lucia Labour Party was in opposition, let me just remind the members opposite, we never said there was something wrong with borrowing. Our fundamental problem or issue with the borrowing by the then UWP administration was it was just borrowing with absolutely little to no accountability, Mr. President. Here you see US 10 million is being borrowed. There's a breakdown for every single thing, but $500 million was borrowed under the previous UWP administration, and where did the money go? That's what Madi Poitier was all about. St. Lucians I was an opposition senator at the time, so I can talk about that. Every Tuesday I had to wake up and come to the House to listen, and on a Thursday present on borrowing where I could not understand what the breakdown was for, Mr. President. We never said we had a problem with borrowing. We had an issue with exactly what it was going to be borrowed for, with the irresponsibility of the UWP administration, and most importantly, the transparency. Now, the big difference with that previous administration and this administration is that we have showed a breakdown. And the 11 million EC from this borrowing, this US 10 million, is for COVID relief. But we borrowed previously $500 million for COVID relief, and we have to come here and borrow 11 million. Why? Because we are paying off your debt. We are paying off your debt, Mr. President. Can you tell me, for 2 years, quarantine facilities, owners are still crying for their monies. They have not been paid. And the St. Lucia Labour Party administration has to come in now and pay off your debt. So don't play, come with this that we are not being transparent with the St. Lucian public. This will not pass. We are coming in, we are saying exactly what we are borrowing for. Mr. President, the 500,000 that is dedicated to the craft and CMOS sectors, as my colleague Kejiano, well, the breakdown, the Prime Minister did give a breakdown where we see 500 would go towards the craft and CMOS sector, 7.2 million for economic recovery and empowerment of youth. And I realized that they had a problem with the breakdown of that. We must not forget that they paid, how much did they pay? 35 million to an accounting firm to do our budget, our people's budget. Our qualified and experienced civil servants could have done that. 35 million you paid to an outside company, but we're giving a fraction of that cost, a fraction of this for administration for our young, skilled and experienced young people, and you have a problem with that? The same way you had a problem with training the police, and you dismantled the whole training vote. In this budget, we had to put back $200,000 to train our police. And they want to talk about the government had no plan for crime. That's just part of it. And if we want to talk about crime, we can talk about it, but I can leave that for later because that is not the issue here before us, Mr. President. We are talking about the 3.4 million for street lighting, and Senator Shalry did speak about that. We are moving away from the sodium and replacing with LED lights. Our fuel, our electricity bills are very high. And yes, we must explore solar energy as well, Mr. President. But in the meantime, this is what we can do to cushion the blow. We did not cause, yes, and they stopped. If we have to go to the Denry Farm project that they stopped. Mr. President, we did not cause climate change, but as a country, we need to do the responsible thing and do what we can to reduce and mitigate the effects of climate change in St. Lucia. And this is just one aspect of it. We know that St. Lucia, our Prime Minister, is the head of sustainable development at CARICOM, and he's made a commitment to ensuring that a lot of our efforts will go towards mitigating efforts in St. Lucia against climate change. A further breakdown talks about the $4 million for the Millennium Highway West Coast Road. Yes, the sun turning started under the previous UWP administration, and I know there's going to be an inquiry as to why this project is taking so long. Why the efforts that were given to the first allocation that was given to execute that project. Why was it taking so long? Different people signed different contracts, you in this and that. But Mr. President, all of these things we have to look into. And because the previous administration was not transparent about a lot of things, the St. Lucia Labour, because the previous administration was not accountable. Exactly. So, Mr. President, I did not want to really stand to speak on this because I really thought it was straightforward. We knew it was repurposing of funds. I remember there was a time right before election we had to come on a Thursday to come to do this borrowing. They kept delaying, they delayed. They wanted to borrow it, but we are simply repurposing this for efforts that will really matter to our people in this time and age. So when members opposite want to come and say the St. Lucia Labour Party will get a failing grade, the St. Lucia Labour Party administration will get a failing grade for what it's doing for these people, we have done so much for our people in 100 days, more than you have ever done in 5 to 6 years, Mr. President. And we can go there. We can go there. We We heard the Prime Minister's allocations in his budget. We have been seeing what has been happening, the efforts that is going to make our people more competitive. Were you at Export the Runway last night? I don't remember the last time they ever did that. I saw a number of brilliant designers walking that runway last night, Mr. President. And I stayed there all the way to the end because I'm saying this is what we have to offer to our people. Diversifying our efforts, putting our people on the global stage. When they were so concerned with just building hotels that they never even built one in 5 years, we are diversifying and we are doing the right thing and ensuring that what we experienced with COVID, we hope to never experience again. So, Mr. President, my advice is for the next the last speaker is to support this motion because we really need to ensure that efforts are put in place so we can take our country to the next level. Thank you.
What are you saying, Senator?
Senator Stanislas.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. And let me welcome the students from Birmingham University to this honorable chamber. Wishing you all the very best and God's richest blessings during your stay on the island. Mr. President, today the members opposite have been caught in the web of lies and deceit when it comes to borrowing. Members, Mr. President, just a few months ago, chanted Ma dipwete. Mais aujourd'hui, il y a un parlement, j'ai déjà dit, pour prêter 134 millions de dollars. They are here today, the first day. In one sitting, 4 resolutions to borrow over $154 million. The same government in opposition, Mr. President, who echoed to the people of St. Lucia, to the children of St. Lucia, who is going to pay those debts that the United Workers' Party is being accrued. Who is going to pay that debt of $144.5 million? Whose children? Because you all said back, it was the children of St. Lucia who was going to pay the monies we borrowed. I want to ask you all, of the $500 million you all are borrowing to finance this year's budget, whose children are going to pay for those monies? Are they Bajan children? Antiguan children? They were all against borrowing, Mr. President. I'm asking another question. Whose children are going to pay what you are proposing there?
Keep going, my brother.
Yeah.
Don't be sidetracked.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy President. I shall continue with my presentation. The same persons, Mr. Deputy President, who clamored against borrowing in the budget presentation, the appropriation bill of 2020-2023. It's already a document of the House, Mr. Deputy President. I refer you to page 58, debt management. The Prime Minister's words, Mr. Speaker, debt is an inescapable reality if we are to finance the capital investments necessary to expand the economy.
Wow.
It was a problem on the United Workers' Party to borrow. We didn't have to borrow, but under their administration, it is an inescapable reality.
That's just the beginning.
And hence today we are here to borrow in the first motion 10 million US, and the other three motions, all of it will amount to $154 million. This is the same Prime Minister in opposition who said you wouldn't be able to borrow. But today, less than 1 year in office, the fiscal space is available as a result of the policies of the United Workers' Party for you to come and borrow $144.5 million in one sitting. And you all know it. It is right there. Economic and social review. It doesn't lie. It doesn't lie. Economic and social review, the estimates. Revenue have peaked to pre-COVID numbers. You all went about $120 million above the projected outturn. So don't tell me it is not true. Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, I believe in the lower house on Tuesday it was said that the crisis in which we are in today is worse than COVID.
Yes, it was said.
Fact. Madam Senator said that it's fact.
So
the crisis in which we are in today is worse than COVID. Interesting, Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President. All they do is blame Russia-Ukraine war.
Yeah.
You understand there's a war, Russia-Ukraine war?
If it rains, Russia-Ukraine.
We never said that there's no Russia-Ukraine war. And that is the crisis of the day. And we are still lingering from COVID. But I want Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, to refresh their memory on the crisis of COVID,
yes,
which we had to deal with.
Yes.
And compare it to the crisis you'll have today.
That's right.
And let us go back to March 2020, Mr. Deputy President,
Correct.
when this country was shut down.
Yes.
All borders closed. All hotels closed. Businesses almost shut down. Almost 14,000 persons working in the hotel industry at home. Revenue dropped in certain instances by 70%. From 100 million a month to 33 million, 35 million, 45 million. Mr. Deputy President. And yet still, with all of that, every civil servant was paid at paid on time. The debt of the country was paid. We never defaulted. All the increases in operating cost at VH, OKEU, the Cuban Brigade, quarantine and so on, we were able to meet expenses. Income support, electricity support, additional persons in the public assistance program, increase in the amount of monies to the most vulnerable, with revenue dropping by 70, 60, 50, 40%. Today, Mr. Deputy President, revenue is back to pre-COVID numbers.
That's correct. That is a fact.
The 2 airports are open.
That is correct.
Flights are coming in.
That's right.
All the resorts have reopened.
Yes.
A majority of the hotel employees are back at work.
Yes.
There is the trickle-down effect from tourism happening.
Yes.
What has happened? Expenses, medical expenses, COVID have gone down. The numbers have gone down. The number of persons at quarantine facilities have gone down.
That's correct.
And you want to tell me that the crisis now is worse than COVID?
Not at all.
Who's going to believe that? Who is going to believe that?
The red zone.
Yeah, who is going to believe that? You're not in the world. You are not in the world. For you to tell people the crisis now is worse than COVID? Mr. President, Mr. Deputy President, we heard about youth economy, CMOS, cottage industries, street lighting. I never said it's not important. They're all important. They're all important. But it is the hypocrisy coming from you all on this side.
That's right. That's
The
right.
hypocrisy when it comes to borrowing.
That's right. Tell them.
Because y'all know, y'all said it, it is inescapable to borrow. And y'all know that when we borrowed during the COVID crisis, it was for budgetary support. Our revenue had gone down, Mr. Deputy President, by 70, 60, 50, 40%. You all know that. But yet still, you all played cheap politics and created fear, confusion in the minds of the people of this country that UWP was only borrowing, and nothing has been done with the money. You all have returned to pre-pandemic revenue levels. CIP have generated over $100 million.
Correct, brother.
And today, you all are coming here to borrow over $124 million. I have not heard anything from the leader of government business regarding fuel prices. We know fuel prices have gone up all over the world. I'm not blaming you all. I'm not blaming the government for inflation, for the price of fuel, for the price of foods. And I'm coming to that. Mr. Deputy President, back during the financial crisis of 2008, Mr. Deputy President, 2007, 2008, 9, oil was about $147 US a barrel. 147 a barrel. United Workers' Party was in government back then. Fuel was at $12.75 a gallon. Now, fuel is $104 US a barrel. 104 US a barrel.
$40 less.
The price of a gallon of gas is $17.95.
Wow.
And right now, our revenue is much higher than back in 2007, 2008, on a monthly basis. 2008, 2009, the recession, at $12.75 a gallon of fuel in St. Lucia, we never raised bus fares on the people. It is at $17.95, but you'll have raised it on the people during this inflation crisis. You all have enough revenue right now to subsidize the fuel and cap the cost of fuel in the country. Because there are many other Caribbean countries doing the same.
That's right, brother.
You all have no excuses. No excuses, Mr. Deputy President, when it comes to that. There are many measures which can be taken with that $140 million you are borrowing to help with the rising cost of foods. Many measures. We're not blaming you all for the increase. We understand the issue, but there are many things that we can do as a government, policies you all can implement. You all can reduce the VAT.
That's correct.
You all can further, we reduce it by 2.5, go further down and reduce it by another 2.5%. You all can reduce some of the import duties. You all can do that. You all can do that.
But you care about people who do it. You care about people.
Mr. Deputy President,
You're getting loans.
excuses after excuses. Weeks, no sugar. And all sorts of excuses. When all Caribbean countries, all OECS CARICOM countries have sugar all over the place.
Right.
Only St. Lucia.
You can't.
All over. Martinique, St. Vincent, Dominica, Barbados, all over. But just coming with supply chain issues. You know that's how they are supply chain issues.
Yeah.
Only in St. Lucia we have supply chain issues.
Yeah.
Not to get sugar.
The difference is
Huh?
we have a government that can't manage.
They can't manage. They cannot manage. And Mr. President, I got I got a pound of sugar this morning. I'm saying, look at this. That's the quality of sugar. That's the quality of sugar you all importing into this country. What's that? Brown sugar? What color is that? Huh?
Show it.
That's the quality of the sugar you all are bringing in for our people. Un sick, vous passez à même douci en dit télé on jette ça. Vous passez à douci, en dit malo bi extra. That is what you're importing into the country after weeks of supply chain issues. And you all talk about governance, management. You all cannot even manage a government warehouse to bring in the right sugar for the people of the country. And you want to come to Parliament and talk about governance and management. They want to kill people with that kind of sugar. I do not know if it is brown, if it is black, if it is tinted what, I don't know what. I do not know what, Mr. Deputy President. I do not know what. So, Deputy President, $134 million has been borrowed today. But yet still, passport prices have increased from $80 to $250. You can subsidize it on our government. Who's in government right now? When did the increase in the price of passports came into effect?
You're not in charge, man.
You're not in charge. Who's in charge? You all changed all policies. You all stopped everything. You all couldn't stop the increase in the price of passports. Who do you all think you all are fooling, Mr. Deputy President? Whom are you all fooling? At the stroke of a pen, the Minister of Finance could stop the price of passports or anything. You should come and tell us. You should come and tell us. Mr. Deputy President, $144 million has been borrowed today. 10 million US in this first motion has been borrowed, Mr. President. But yet still, we are asking vendors for Carnival to pay $40, $15, $20 for a little tree. In these hard economic times, they're trying to make $1 to feed their families. We're asking them for a little tray of drinks on the sidewalk, a little grill, a little cooler, pay $40, $50. But, Mr. President, Deputy President, we were able to give Carnival bands 100% duty-free concession. But the little people who are struggling to make ends meet, they have to pay for a cooler of drinks, they have to pay for a little grill, and yet they tell you they're putting people first. Whom are the people they put in first, Mr. Deputy President? Mr. President, $134 million, and like my colleague Senator articulated earlier on, we did not hear anything about the $1,500 promised in the election campaign for every citizen of the country. We didn't hear anything about the $1,500. For Christ's sake, in one sitting, you all are borrowing a total of $144 million, not even $500 you can offer. When revenue have ticked back up to pre-pandemic levels, CIP revenue is up. Come on. You all have not said anything about the removal of the $1.50 tax for the fishermen. And with $144.5 million being borrowed in one sitting. Where is the tax refunds? You all have $144 million in the coffers. Give the people the money. That is what you all need to do. Give the people the money. Because back then, that was the song you all were singing. And you all understood the challenges. Do not come and make excuses to the people of St. Lucia about Ukraine and this and that. We know there's a Ukraine and Russia war. But you all can do better. You all have the capacity, you all have the fiscal space to maneuver and do better for the people.
That's right.
But we just can't.
That is what you all need to do. So, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and President, this motion is a motion which has revealed that this is a government which is lost in transition. Lost in transition, Mr. Deputy President. And I have no faith in this motion being put out there to achieve any of the objectives that the leader of government business have articulated, Mr. Deputy President. And I believe that the government is in a position to do a lot more for the people of St. Lucia who are suffering right now. And it is not been done. Misplaced priorities, Mr. Deputy President. I thank you.
Very.
Take the mic now.
Senator Reynolds.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy President. It was not my intention to speak, but I had to just add my voice to give support to the motion before us this afternoon. Before I delve briefly, Mr. Deputy President, I wish to offer condolences to the families of Mr. Keith Weeks, an excellent educator, families of Mrs. Daphne Murray, a former politician, and of course, best wishes to our four-time Calypso monarch, Royal Highness Queen Minelle, and to send best wishes to her and say to her, we missed her at the finals. I want to stand in solidarity with her and to send strength and courage to her daughter, Chanel, as she continues to take care of her mother and family members. So we seek justice for Royal Highness, our Queen Minelle. I want to extend congratulations to the 42 young women who participated in a workshop, a training workshop here as part of Why Will St. Lucia Chapter, Young Women in Leadership program in St. Lucia. 42 young women from the ages of 18 to 25 years participated over a couple of weeks. They came from all over St. Lucia and they had a chance to do a simulation exercise in this August chamber. And it was brilliant to see them. So I want to say to them, continue to be transformational leaders in their communities. And I hope one day I can see them sitting or standing and representing their communities, their people in this August chamber. I also want to add my voice to welcome the students of my alma mater, Birmingham University. And I want to wish them the best as they are here in St. Lucia, and of course to encourage them to take in everything good that St. Lucia has to offer. And I hope that this is a learning experience, and when they go back, they may give best wishes from all the students, former students of Birmingham University who are St. Lucians, the former Prime Minister, Dr. Kenny Anthony, and a whole host of us. So welcome, and of course, enjoy St. Lucia's beauty, and hospitality. Mr. Deputy President, the motion before us is about borrowing for the people of St. Lucia, to benefit the people of St. Lucia. And like I heard, the presentation's been scripted. Everyone says that we were here saying that borrowing was bad and we should not borrow. It has been refuted, and so I do not understand what part of it they do not get. That we were saying that they were irresponsible in their borrowing millions of dollars, and the people of St. Lucia did not benefit. They stood by helplessly watching millions of dollars go to friends, foreigners, and family. I maintain this, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and it can be a whole lot of noise on this side, Mr. Deputy President. It will not change the situation. St. Lucians know what they experienced during 2016 to 2021. They know. They have not forgotten. There might be so much noise coming from this other side. It's the carnival season, but this is no carnival in here. We are not masquerading in here. We are not jumping up in here. This is the people's business we are taking care of in here. And no amount of noise, no amount of laughter and giggling. I am representing the people of this country and through the government to talk about the needs of the people. And I do not appreciate all this laughter and fun, because this is a serious place. Okay? We saw it happening in America. We just saw it in the UK. At least in the UK, they were brave enough to tell the leader, enough is enough. When it was time for the vote of confidence in this chamber, they all sat there with their lips sealed and not said what they had to say to the leader to stop that pain that they were causing the people of St. Lucia. Now they come here screaming of all kinds of untruths. When it was time to ask the relevant questions on behalf of the people who voted them in Ancillary and Soufrière, they were mute. I am proud the people of the UK and the people of the US and the people of St. Lucia did what they had to do about these leaders. We need to be bold. We need to be brave. We need to have what it takes to stand up and be honest. And you were not honest when you had to say to your leader, enough is enough. You had to, and you failed. So you have no. I'm happy you are asking questions. I'm happy you are asking questions. Ask questions about the money is going to. And definitely it is here for the youth economy. We have young people all over the country who have great skill, great capacity. All they need is the startup point. All they need is direction. All they need is guidance. They need that, and they need the resources to do what they need to do to make this country a better place. They need to open doors. We need to open doors for them. I believe in that. Yes, we need to give the crafters the resources they need to make way and put St. Lucia on the map. We need to give support to those within the CMOS sector. I have been down in Poile and I see men and women rising up early as 4:30 in the morning, going into the cold water in the Sea of Poile to harvest their CMOS, to put their CMOS to dry. If you see the spaces that they have the CMOS, we need to support them because CMOS is a brilliant product. We need to give them the support, the resources for better drying facility. We need to give them the gas that they need to get into this cold water at 4:30 in the morning. We need to support the CMOS farmers. We need to support them. And that is why I am supporting this motion here this afternoon, Mr. Deputy President, because St. Lucians will benefit. And yes, we talk about the roads. When we had made a road for DSH for $13 million. We need these monies could have been used for the people of this country. But no, we use it for other foreigners. We use it for other people in the St. Lucians. We have no oil. but we have our crafters. We have no bauxite, but we have our CMOS farmers. We have no diamond, but we have our youth. We're not like Guyana. They have all sorts of things, although managing badly. We're not like Guyana, Mr. Deputy President. We have, and as our students are leaving, we wish them well, we say goodbye to them, and we thank them for being with us today. Through all this crisis, we are not saying that this is not a crisis situation. It is a crisis situation. But the government has been able to respond, reinstating the distress fund, taking care of the elderly, taking care of the NICE program, expanding the NICE program. We are not saying it is not bad times. We are saying, yes, we acknowledge it is bad times. But we have to manage our resources in the most prudent way. And we have to manage whatever we borrow in the most prudent way. And I say to the members opposite, keep your eyes on the money. When the borrowing happens, follow the plans, follow the implementation process, follow the policies. Make sure that you see what is happening, where the monies are going. That is your responsibility as senators opposite, to keep track of the money. We're not saying it's bad. Nobody likes borrowing, but you have to. But it's how you spend the money. Who benefits from the loans? It must be your people. Just like a parent, if you want to borrow money, you say it's for your children's needs, and you go to the rum shop and you drink it all. That's irresponsible borrowing. We want to make sure, if you care so much about St. Lucians, keep your eyes on the money. And I heard a member opposite asking, who will pay back? Who will pay back? We needed to hear those questions when we were dealing with DSH and Krabat and Permando. We needed to hear those questions. There was no voice.
He asked it in closed.
Not a voice. Not a voice. Except, of course, for Mr. P and the other 6'5". I don't know whether they asked those questions in cabinet, but had they asked the questions, the former Prime Minister
Mr. Deputy President,
to ask those,
I rise in the
to
point
do
of
what
order.
he's doing.
Point of order.
Point of order, Mr. Deputy President.
What was the point of order?
35, the member is imputing improper motive, and as a member of the former cabinet, I cannot sit here and allow her to do so. So if we look at Standing Order 37.5, you would see that the member is clearly in violation of it, because by asking who will pay back, she is clearly asserting that somehow we use taxpayers' money to develop Cabot and to develop DSH. Those assertions are totally incorrect. We never spend money for horses. We never spent money for building a horse racing track. We never, when you ask the question, who will pay back? We're talking about borrowing state funds. It is very strongly implied that what she is suggesting, but that question, it has a big implication. So you can't imply that we use state funds to fund DSH. That's absolutely untrue. And I asked the member to prove that. If she can't prove it, she needs to desist from saying so.
Well, I didn't understand that to be what the member was saying. As I understood her, she was very generally dealing with monies being borrowed. I didn't get her to be saying that government had borrowed monies for DSH and for these things. She was saying that questions should have been asked in cabinet as regards those various activities.
If you don't mind, Mr. President, we're speaking in the context of spending state funds. The member went on to respond to a question asked by the senator, who will pay back? Which is clearly, he's asking about the public debt that was risen by this administration, by the motion, which is seeking to borrow state funds. Now, by him asking who's pay back, her response is that he should have asked that question when we were talking about DSH, right? And I'm saying to her, she cannot link the two because they are vastly different. That's what I'm saying, because not a single dollar of taxpayers' monies were spent on the DSH project. And that's an absolute fact. I challenge the member to disprove me.
As I said, I did not get the member to be saying that, but I will ask the member to be very careful in what she says to make sure she does not go down that line. Thank you.
Thank you. Moving right along, Mr. Deputy, since people cannot understand, I guess, what's the point? So I am saying, Mr. Deputy President, that I appreciate the questions being asked about borrowing. In all honesty, I appreciate. I am saying, had those questions been asked 5 years ago, 6 years ago, had people been as resolute in standing for the people of this country, it would have been a different situation. But I appreciate the questions being asked today on behalf of the people. But the people of this country, under this administration, will benefit. The farmers, the fishers, as they are already, the youth, students, public servants, police, they will benefit for the various initiatives being crafted, being implemented. After loans are taken, they will benefit, and this is what it's about. The people doing what is needed for the people. Mr. President, Deputy President, I have no time for this back and forth and noise. I have no time for this. I want to ensure that the loans are granted and the people benefit. I rest my case.
Thank you, Mr. President. I will attempt in my brief rebuttal. I intended for it to be extremely brief, but I've been given so many pointers that I think need to be addressed. I will do so briefly. And in doing so, I hope that there is some level of sanity and clarity brought to this debate. Mr. Deputy President, first of all, before I actually do the brief rebuttal, I have noticed a pattern that started in the lower house, and one of the senators today attempted to continue to do so. And I want to say on behalf of all of us in this Senate that when there is a situation where someone's life or health has been in some way affected, we need to keep it away from the politics. And to stand up in this house and mention our former Queen, Minel, in the same sentence where you will discuss or mention issues that deal with which political party people support and what they sing about, I think that's a very dangerous line. And I think it is very low. And I think what I will advise the member is to say, or self-expression, in the same sentence where you are expressing, words of comfort to someone who has been hurt. I think it is better if the members opposite advise their leader to visit Minel and reach out to her in the way that our government has decided to do. I think that's the approach we should take. So in that vein, I also wish her well, and I will not descend to that level to continue any discussion about her condition or her situation in this August chamber. Mr. President, as I welcome you back. In my brief rebuttal, I take note of a few points that were raised by various members of the opposition. I wish to begin with the issue raised with the senator who spoke second, the Senator Polius. She did mention something regarding acknowledging actually that the global events, particularly the war on Ukraine, have influenced the activities of other countries and that borrowing is necessary. And I think that's about the only thing I remember that really contributed in a way that is meaningful to this debate. So I want to reiterate and thank her for making that point, that the global events and the circumstances do have an effect on us. So I commend her for acknowledging that. Now, she asked in that same discussion who is benefiting from the borrowing that we're doing, and attempted to indicate that it wasn't everyone. I want to cite one example that she can relate to, Mr. President, because like myself, she is a former educator. I want to cite that what we are doing is benefiting the children of St. Lucia, the children in the schools that we have paid their CXC fees, the children in the schools that we have paid their facilities fees, and the children in the schools that we have given their laptops back. That's how it's benefiting. And these children are the children of all the parents of this country. Blue, red, black, white, and yellow. We are not going through any kind of political system to take care of them. Every student in this country is benefiting. So I hope that question is answered. Mr. President, the street lighting program was a discussion point. I raised it in the explanation, and it was challenged by almost all the members opposite. I want to say, Mr. President, to address the leader of opposition business who raised it first. He asked for explanation, he wanted more detail, and he wanted to know how many lights were going to be paid for. Mr. President, I have two suggestions for him. One, as a former MP of Ansari Canries, where Jackmel is a community, I'll tell him that these lights are just a little more than the lights that were put on the Jackmel playing field or being put through the village tourism program. And when he can give us an explanation of how these two link, then I'll give him the rest of the answer. Mr. President, I also want to answer the question by also telling him that if he, as the leader of opposition business, wants some more clarification on the number of lights, he should consult the Pajoa letter, because I think there's a lot of content there that he can revise. Consult that letter, and I think he'll get some clarification. Mr. President, I move to a third issue, and I think that was raised by, again, the leader of government business. For the umpteenth time of opposition business, for the umpteenth time in this Honorable Senate. Mr. President, he keeps referring to this $1,500. The last time I said it to him in English, I'll say it to him in Creole. Si après, ou pour même ni en l'année en opposition aux mal, c'est pas $1,500 là qui a empêché au mal. And I think the issue here, I don't know how much he's concerned about that $1,500, whether, as my colleague said, if it is for the people of this country or if it is for himself. Mr. President, on another note regarding that, I want to also remind the member that while he's asking for direct cash to be given to people, if you do a bit of math and you calculate the cost that is incurred on a parent for buying a laptop, for paying CXC fees for 1 year or for one term for the child, for paying facilities fees for 1 year for the child, and you add together, it will be way in excess of double the $1,500 that he's talking about. So by these three actions only, this government has directly impacted the pockets of the parents who now can make use of that money to do other things. So it's not just because we haven't given everybody $1,500 cash in their hands that we have not made a dent, or we have not made a serious contribution towards alleviating the plight of the people of this country. So, Mr. President, I also need to remind the opposition that sometimes memory is short, and I don't like to come to this honorable house to remind them of what they did in government, because it has landed them over there. And it's very obvious that the people of St. Lucia weren't stupid and they made the right decision. So when they stand there and try to tell us that we're fooling people, we're not fooling anybody. Nobody's been fooled. St. Lucians sit, they've observed, and they make the decision at the right time. So if we want to know who's been fooled, let's wait for the result of the next elections, and we'll see who's been fooled. Mr. President, I also made note of a fourth point, and that is the discussion on COVID. There was a point raised by Senator Stanislaus when he asked about the COVID crisis, or suggested that the COVID crisis in his government's tenure was worse than the current situation that we have. I don't want to try to make comparisons there, because this can be a long drawn-out debate. But there's one thing I'd like to tell him, and I'd like to remind him of. During that COVID crisis that the opposition claims was so devastating, and we know it was, This opposition, then in government, borrowed in excess of $300 million that was put on the backs of St. Lucians in the name of that COVID crisis. So while he's saying that things were bad, they had fiscal space to borrow in excess of over $300 million that a lot of it now is still unaccounted for. We still want to know what happened to the vaccines money that was paid, that we cannot retrieve. We still want to know why we are still, after you borrowed $300+ million, this government is trapped with having to pay quarantine fees and quarantine bills that you left over. So when there is this talk about which crisis is worse, I don't want to get into this discussion. It's very clear what's happening. Mr. President, I now move to the issue of fuel prices. Mr. President, fuel prices around the world have gone up, and I think the opposition has admitted that. But the question was asked of this government as to what are we doing, and I remembered when the member of opposition, Senator Stanislas, with his charisma and his body language, give the people their money, These are little catchphrases that they thought was working until July 27th. I'm 26. Mr. President, he did ask, what are we doing for the people of St. Lucia when it comes to the price of fuel and fuel-related items? Well, I'll use one example, and I want the Senate to pay attention to the figure that I'm about to give. Mr. President, here is what we are doing. Let's take a 20-pound cylinder of gas that the average mother, the average household in St. Lucia, the average low-income individual purchases maybe once or twice a month. Mr. President, the government is subsidizing $26.15 on every cylinder of 20 pound, or every 20-pound cylinder. And so the St. Lucian household, average household, is now paying $43.78 for that 20-pound cylinder. Had it not been for the actions of this government now, the average household, the average housewife in this country would have had to pay $69.93 for a 20-pound cylinder. So you want me to answer the question? Here is what we're doing. We are subsidizing heavily the cost of fuel that they did not do in their time. They collected $4 of excise tax on fuel. Right now, Mr. President, we're collecting zero. In fact, in addition to collecting zero, we are contributing to it. But they enjoyed $4, increased it by $2.50, by 60%, and enjoyed $4 of excise tax. But now he's asking us, what are we doing? Well, in addition to not collecting any excise tax, we are further subsidizing on the 20-pound cylinder. I will also use the 22-pound cylinder, which households also purchase. Mr. President, right now the 22-pound cylinder, a household or consumer is paying $48.16. The government is subsidizing this by $28.78. Without the subsidy, Mr. President, the math will show us that consumer would have had to pay $76.92 today for the price of a 22-pound cylinder. That is what we're doing. We are not asking a single mother or a single parent family to go to the gas station and purchase a cylinder of 22-pound cylinder for $76. We are absorbing $28.75. There was a time I paid that amount for a cylinder of gas. So when the member asked, what are we doing? I think it's a good question to ask. It is a good question. We are concerned about our people. I gave him two examples of what we are doing as per dealing with the cost of fuel. We are making it easier for the average St. Lucian family to be able to afford cooking gas. Just one example. Mr. President, I'm not even going to the price of bread. That's another one that we are heavily subsidizing for the bakers, to allow St. Lucians to access a basic commodity. So I don't want to spend the entire debate on these examples. I've given two. Mr. President, I want to now move to a situation where a question was raised. I think it was during the discussion when Senator Reynolds was speaking and the leader of government business interjected. And the interjection was based on a point that the senator asked, who will pay? And he stood up on a point of order to suggest that the member was imputing improper motives. But Mr. President, I want to address that. Who is going to pay? And he also attempted, I don't know why every time he makes his noise, when I'm here to respond to him, he's not in his chair. You know, I don't know. I think I'm going to just stop responding because he's not here to get a response. But I will leave the message with his two colleagues. When he returns, please let him know that I'm responding. Mr. President, the leader of government business challenged my colleague senator on the point that somebody has to pay for debt that was incurred on this government because of DSH. And he wanted to refute it. I want to repeat, Mr. President, that it is true. It is absolutely true that DSH caused us to have to be paying debt today. And I will give you the example. While we didn't build a horse race track on the government's money, yes, we never said so, his government built a $13 million road, bypass road, a $13 million bypass road to facilitate the building of the horse race track. Mr. President, who is paying that $13 million now? To relocate abattoir? I mean, I don't want to go into all of these. There is so much cost incurred on this government to facilitate DSH. You think St. Lucians are not smart enough to know that just because you didn't buy the horses and you didn't build the horse race track, that we didn't spend money on DSH? We are still paying bills in this government incurred because of DSH, and we have nothing to show for it but some horses that were sent back to wherever. Mr. President, when a member can stand on his feet and accuse a colleague senator of ours on this side of the House of imputing improper motives because she made a statement of fact, if he was still there, I would have asked him to withdraw it, Mr. President. This is grossly misleading, and I think he's the one who was imputing the improper motive. So this government that I serve in is now saddled with debt that was left over by the government that is now in the opposition now, who are now putting pressure and telling us that we shouldn't borrow. But again, Mr. President, St. Lucians answered that question a few months ago. Mr. President, finally on the matter of borrowing. Mr. President, the opposition is not learning. You know, as a teacher, learning was defined as a change of behavior brought about by either experience or change of cognitive features, and there are all kinds of definitions. Yeah. Learning is supposed to be something that causes you to change your behavior. So when you learn, there are things that you should not repeat, you should not do, you should change your. But I don't think that this opposition is learning. And my colleague senator, who's an educator, can relate to what learning is. But I see this opposition, the very same things that caused them to land over there, they're coming to the Senate to do it again. I just wish them luck with it, Mr. President. Mr. President, and here is the example. Making a point about borrowing as if we suggested that they shouldn't be borrowing and that we are not borrowing for good reasons. Mr. President, I want to remind this opposition that between March 2020, soon after there was the disclosure of the COVID-19 pandemic, between March 2020 and July 2021, just over a year, this opposition, then in government, borrowed $821 million. That's what they borrowed, $821 million in total. And one of these included a single loan after canceling a PPP arrangement that would have cost us no money, a single loan for the airport of over $500, that accumulatively $1 million, $500 million. But they can come and sit in this house today. We are asking the government to approve $10 million. And we've broken it down into so many different initiatives that they can come and try to make fun of this, bring in sugar. I don't know what is in that nylon bag, Mr. President. This plastic bag, I think that's mud. I don't know if it's some stuff from the Soufriere Sulphur Springs, and I will not taste it because I don't trust what's in there. Mr. President, I don't know why a member will leave Soufriere with a parcel of mud and come to this house and try to make fun of an attempt by this government to borrow $10 million to help the people of St. Lucia. It tells you how, you can respond to things on the spur of the moment, but to prepare yourself for a debate with that in mind, there is an intention there. That tells you the level at which the opposition is operating. They bring the props to the house. Well, I can thank them, thankfully. It's carnival time, so I forgive them. But there is no carnival in the Senate. This is a serious business place. If you want carnival, go and jump up with the revelers next week, Tuesday. This is a serious place for business. Don't bring props and try to papi show and ridicule the business of this house. Go and get your costume, register with one of the bands, and go and jump up on Tuesday and Monday next week. Mr. President, let me close. In closing, I want to say that this government, after almost 1 year in office, is here to make decisions that the country needs to respond to. There were pronouncements made in the budget, and there were pronouncements made in the Prime Minister's budget speech. And this government will continue to align every action according to these pronouncements in the budget, and will be consistent in its plight or in its effort to ensure that every single initiative, borrowing, legislation, or any other that is taken in this country is going to redound to the benefit of its citizens and is going to bring our country into a better place than we found it when we inherited what this government left for us on July 26th of 2021. I thank you, Mr. President.
Be it resolved that Parliament authorizes the Minister of Finance to borrow the amount of US $10 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China to finance the implication of national development projects and initiatives. Be it further resolved that A, the loan is repayable in 30 consecutive equal or as nearly equal as possible semi-annual installments, the first of which must be made on the last day of the 66th month from the date of the first advance on the loan, and is made by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China, and thereafter on the last day of each successive 6-month period. B, if the full amount of the loan has been drawn down, each principal installment must be in the amount of US $333,334, except that the last principal installment must be in the amount of US $333,314. Otherwise, the amount of each installment shall be adjusted by the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China. C, interest is payable at the rate of the 6-month secured overnight financing rate plus 0.20% plus 1.5% per annum. And D, the loan is repayable in 20 years commencing from the date of the first disbursement of the loan, inclusive of a grace period of 5 years. I now put the question. As many as are of that opinion, say aye. As many as are of a contrary opinion, say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Leader of Government Business.
Mr. President, I move for the suspension of this House, of the Senate, for 1 hour for lunch, to return at 2:30.
Honorable Senators, the question is that this House be suspended for 1 hour until 2:30. All those who have like opinions say aye. All those who have a contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. The ayes have it. This House is suspended. watching a live broadcast of the sitting of the Senate. We have just broken for our first break, our break for lunch, and we should be returning in another hour. So far, we've had papers to be laid, and the first motion out of 5 motions scheduled for today has been debated and discussed, and that motion was a motion to borrow US $10 million from the Export-Import Bank of the Republic of China on Taiwan. And this is to facilitate a lot of national initiatives and developments within the country, such as the Millennium Highway West Coast construction project, and to facilitate the growth of initiatives such as crafts business and CMOS business. We hope you have been enjoying our broadcast and our coverage. We should be back, as I mentioned, within the hour. Please stay tuned to the National Television Network as well as our social media platforms. I'm your host and anchor, Jacques Kingston Compton. You're watching the National Television Network.